Good afternoon, everybody. It's 12:30, so we're going to get started. I appreciate some people will join us as we start the conversation, but thank you for joining us today and welcome to TIA's first Business Excellence webinar. Today we've got John Haynes and Rachel Chamberlain to talk to you about resilient staff and resilient business. So first of all, I'm just going to introduce the both guests. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name's Rachel Chamberlain. I'm a partner at Hill Farm Longley with TH Chamberlain and Son. I've been part of Knowledge Exchange for most of my career until I came home a couple of years ago.
Thank you very much. And John?
Hello everybody. I'm John Haynes, farm manager for MJNSC Collins, 1,200 hectare arable and contracting business on the Essex-Herts border.
Thank you very much. So just before we get started, we're going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. All the attendees have got you're muted and your camera is off, but please do answer and ask any questions through the Q&A function. And we will look at those towards the end of the presentation and hopefully we'll answer all your questions with Rachel and John. Obviously very respectful of your time, so we will be aiming to finish at 1:30. And just to let you know, if anything does happen, we are recording the webinar and we will be sending it out to everybody that has registered for today. So we will get started. Rachel, over to you.
Thanks, Tess. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this webinar series. Like I said, I've been very lucky that most of my career has been about supporting farming businesses to look at their businesses and to look at the people that make up those businesses. What it's done is afforded me an understanding of the complexities of different farming businesses, but also of building and developing the teams that make up those businesses and help them to thrive. Now, that might be a larger corporate business, or it might be quite a small family business where you're looking at actually the team being part of the family, but also the advisors that form part of that decision-making process. For a business to be resilient, it needs to be able to adapt quickly. And for a business to be able to do that, it needs a team that understands, and like I said, when I say team, I mean in its broadest sense, a team that understands what they're trying to achieve and are willing to adapt themselves. That's enabling the team and the business to meet the challenges that it faces. For me, this starts with understanding yourself and what you want. It doesn't matter if you're the owner, the decision maker, a team leader, the most junior person in the team. If you don't know what you want, you can't expect anybody else to know or to help you achieve it. For others to help you achieve what you want and your objectives, you have to share that with them and to understand the drivers of the other people that make up your team. Finding collective ways then to move forward for the goals and targets for the business and for you personally, which is really important. It helps you to understand what the challenges are present, looking at collectively the drivers that are within your team and the challenges then that are going to face the business as a whole. It also helps you to look at the opportunities that might be presenting themselves. So taking the time to think about what this is and what makes you happy, make plans for how you can react to the challenges and take advantage of the opportunities, means that this is something that you should be able to help you use to act quicker and more confidently going forwards. We're going to look today at how we can practically go through this. So TIA have put together some great templates we can use to help frame our thinking process, as well as forming that written record, because writing things down, and you will hear me go on about this quite a few times, I'm afraid, as we go through this morning, or this afternoon rather. Writing things down is not only a great way of making something seem more manageable, but also aids to make it more achievable, having that visual record that you can see, that you can refer back to. John,
Thanks, Rachel.
Sorry, go on, Tess.
I was going to bring John in there. Do you do much of this already, John?
Yeah, very much so. It's often the basics that are overlooked. I could sort of summarize this whole slide here just on the communication. I sort of chuckled to myself when Rachel started off with understanding yourself. When I first started working on a dairy farm at the age of 13 or 14, being shouted at by the older generations for not having a Scooby-Doo what was going on, they just assumed that I'd know what to do. And it's all too common to think that, because it's so clear in your head that everyone else will think that. So the whole process there, I think, is built on a sound communication structure. And that 100% back what Rach says there. You've got to understand yourself, what drives you, what you're trying to achieve, and then start by passing that on and communicating that to the team. And as Rach said, that could be the 20 or 30 people who are out picking in the fields, or it could be the family around the farm kitchen table with the advisor. Team is a very all-encompassing word and covers a lot of different sort of team structures. So yeah, no, it's 100%. Almost every job on the farm starts with that sort of process.
I think although we've got different teams, the communication is that one strand throughout all of it, isn't it? Regardless of the size of it. Rachel, let's talk about being happy.
So, happy questions. So, understanding yourself, what we said, is really important. So we need to ask ourselves what makes us happy to get that understanding. So for me, this is about getting everyone together, sharpening those pencils and asking what makes you happy. So whether that be outside of farming, what makes you happy inside of farming, and with what you do in your job role or the business that you're part of. And then why do you do it, which is a really important factor, as well as what are you good at. The amount of times that I have sat with farmers and family members and team members, and they have struggled to answer what they are good at. We don't put enough credence on what skills we have and how adaptable we actually really are. It's essential that everybody should have a think about what they want personally and out of the business. Having done this, like I said, with hundreds of farmers, whether it be groups of 30 or individual businesses around the kitchen table, it's always been clear that this is not something that enough time is dedicated to. So getting all the decision makers and or all the family members involved in this is a must. Then once you've got those key people in the business and you've got the feedback from them about what makes them happy and their drivers, you can move on to the whole team that makes up the business. Use these answers then to craft a picture of what you want to be and what you want the business to look like and be in sort of 5 to 10 years time. Again, Tia have put together a template called a happy page, that'll help you be able to do this.
John, have you done something similar already, and just putting on your spot, what makes you happy?
That varies day to day, I think. For me, it's a very important part of the team, making sure they're happy. Just looking at the girl in the picture there, she's happy, and she's going to want to come to work. She's going to want to do the best she can and enjoy being there. And sure, everyone has seen and can see when people are not happy, their mind is not 100% on the job, and that's not good morally for them or for the performance of them at work, for the business. And I think agriculture being so intimate and involved, it's all very well saying, "Oh, leave your personal stuff at the door when you come to work." We're human beings at the end of the day, and that's a bonkers request, really. I don't think you can ask people to do that. People will bring things to work, and they'll equally take it home with them as well. So it's really good to try and understand what makes people tick, but also understand what's going on with them. And if you suspect people aren't happy, there's a good reason for it. And it's very difficult sometimes when you know someone's struggling at home with a difficult relationship or accommodation or medical situations. I feel sometimes like I'm sort of stepping outside the role a little bit and intruding, but actually sometimes they need that time to have a chat and to try and help them make them happy. And whilst we think someone's good in a role doing that, if they're not enjoying it and they'd much prefer something else, well then again, I think you've got to grasp the nettle and say, well, if someone's not happy doing something just because they're good at it, they might be even better at the job they want to do. So be dynamic and be. I think it's really important to be prepared to sort of mix things up based on people's feedback.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of taking that feedback, and you will inevitably have differences, from what you might have made an assumption about, but also secondly from differences from what the team members are in terms of their drivers and their objectives. So if I take my mum and dad as an example, because this is the sort of thing I unfortunately make them sit down and do with my sister, who's another partner, and we went through exactly these questions about what was making them happy, what they wanted to achieve, and those sorts of things, so that we could come up with a 5-year plan. And they literally sat there and mum went, right, the thing that makes me happy is spending time with my husband, John. And dad sat there and went, the thing that makes me happy is being outside of the house and being on the farm. And I was like, okay, good. We're going to have to find compromise here, that we can build a collective objective. And that's the point. You can find ground that enables both parties or all of the parties to be happy as they can be. Some things, John and I were talking before, sometimes you can't make things different, and we have to find ways of making things work for people. But at least if you've got an understanding, we're not making assumptions about people, we can try and make things as good as we can and get that buy-in from our team so that they're engaged and they want to work and adapt to make themselves resilient and to make the business resilient. Now, stuff changes in life, so I'd like to say that mum and dad's differences have got smaller as they've got older. They haven't, but we need to periodically review what makes us happy as things changes in life. There's, like John was saying, relationship changes, accommodation issues change, our stages of life change, and therefore we should be periodically looking back at how our drivers have effectively changed. And then going back to that communication piece, sharing as much of this as you can with your colleagues, with your teams, helping them to understand why they're being asked to do things certain ways or why you do things certain ways, but also then enabling them to contribute to how you might better achieve your objectives more effectively. So doing this with the whole team helps to understand the drivers across the team, identify where you are or aren't satisfying them as a business, how you and the business can support team members to achieve different objectives, be happier, and therefore having that, like I said, a more fulfilled workforce and a more resilient attitude when things don't go to plan, when things are hard. It also can help bring up, what are the challenges that we're going to be facing going forward, but what are some opportunities that are there from the answers that have been pulled together just from these simple questions. So if you are thinking about what makes you happy and what you want to achieve, inevitably you are going to be thinking about what the problems are and what the barriers might be to us getting there. And that's okay. In fact, it's a really, really good thing, because you can then look at how we can plan for those challenges. Some are more likely to happen than others, and some might come out of nowhere if we do no thinking about this. This planning will help us be more adaptable and therefore more resilient.
John, is this the kind of planning you do on farm?
Yeah, very much so. I think having these conversations and understanding of the team is the difference between a team that can perform and demonstrate resilience versus a team that will struggle and potentially fail. And it's difficult because I've in the past been accused of being too touchy-feely. But actually, when you get a team that's actually confident to sit down and openly talk about what we're talking about here and go through all this and air their feelings confidently and talk about it, it makes such a difference, and it enables you as a manager or as a leader of a team or as part of the team to be able to contribute and lead that team forward to do what you're essentially trying to set out to do. And again, it's all too tempting. Oh, we've got to get out on the field. We've got cattle to sort out. We've got this to do. But time like this is so valuable, and having a 15-20 minute chat a couple of times a week is so important. You can't put a price on it.
And time saving as well, I would imagine, once you're in the swing of it.
Yeah, absolutely, because you can preempt. It's a lot easier to preempt and avert things going wrong as opposed to them turning up on the day and then having to deal with it. It's kills efficiency and time. So trying to sit down and be open and upfront gives you that opportunity to see things coming on the horizon and then talk with the team about how you overcome it, as opposed to reacting on the day. And I'd say in this industry, people react probably with panic and anger, rather than cool and calmly and collectively. And I put my hand up. I do that sometimes in the heat of harvest or drilling, when you're tired, the weather's being difficult, something comes up, frustration kicks in straight away, and then everything goes south. It's just, it kills efficiency, it kills time. And if you were to look at it from the outside, you just put your head in your hands and go, this was so obvious. It could have been seen coming. Obviously, some things you can't see coming, but if you've got a really gelled team who are confident talking in front of each other, airing their problems, bringing ideas, and ideas being welcomed, there's so much more chance of them actually reacting to that. And my view is if you are a successful leader of that team, that will happen without much of your involvement. You'll be able to stand back and hopefully watch that happen, but equally be around to step in and be that sort of gentle guidance to make sure they're going the right way.
Rachel.
Thanks, Tess. I think there are a lot of challenges that can face us in agriculture, but there's also a lot of opportunities that present themselves, and those conversations and bringing different ideas together is really important. Mostly you can categorize the sort of the challenges and the opportunities that come to us within production, marketing, price, people, financial, and legal and political. And if you again, that whole writing it down picture, I like writing stuff down. For me, it helps me manage things and manage my headspace as well. One way of doing this is through a SWOT analysis. So looking at the strengths and the weaknesses of about you, your team, your business, that sort of internal picture, and then the opportunities and the threats. So the things that are happening in the world that are going to have an impact on you and your business. Again, Tia got a lovely template for this. And in a second, I think Tess might even put up the SWOT analysis that I've put together for our business. So apologies, you're going to have to read my writing, but this is just to give you a little bit of an idea of the sort of things that go through my head and when I'm sort of looking at addressing what we're going to do and how we're going to put our plans together to make sure that we can still operate, and not just operate but succeed. I've used the drivers that we come up with, like collectively as a business, as a family team, to what makes us happy, what we we want out of the farm and out of ourselves to help populate this. We can use it to identify the skill gaps potentially, or whether we've got good breadth across the roles, which we're lucky we have here. Whether we've got enough people in certain areas of the business, whether the people aren't enjoying certain elements, like John said. It's about looking at this to see, are we going to be able to achieve our objectives? So given all of this that's down on the piece of paper, we've got our business objective, and for us that's about, I'm just going to read it because I've got it down, a business that's able to wipe its face paying family labour and then has good environmental impact. So just, that's our objective. Can everything that's in that SWOT analysis, can we still achieve that, or do we need to reassess our business objectives? Luckily we don't. It's also about making sure we put down on that SWOT analysis the elephant in the room. Is there something that is going to potentially go wrong, or that's something nobody wants to talk about, like a death, a divorce, something that's quite a big personal issue usually, or a member of a staff team leaving? Is what sort of it's not, we can't do is hide our head in the sand on it. We have to acknowledge those things so that we can try and make a plan for it. There are lots of things. Again, we've talked about the fact that I've got quite a full SWOT analysis there, so that we can have multiple pages. Okay, you don't have to fit them into those 4 boxes, but we can have lots of things. And again, writing it down can, in something like a SWOT, it doesn't have to be a SWOT analysis. You can use just lists, anything that helps you, can stop it seeming quite so overwhelming. But it is important to spend the time thinking about and making plans for the right things in the right order. I wonder if John's got anything on how he prioritises.
Oh, that changes all the time. Just going back to that SWOT analysis, it's interesting. We've all got our own perspective on things. What we might perceive as a strength or a weakness, other people would perceive to be the other way around, and it's all too easy to go in the sort of downward spiral of doom, thinking everything's really bad and this is a weakness, that's a threat. But actually, a fresh set of eyes and an opinion on something, actually, well, that's actually a strength. That's an opportunity. And it comes back to the beginning, setting targets and where do we want to be? Well, actually, that I thought yesterday that was a weakness, but actually now we can turn that into a strength or an opportunity. So again, it's really good to bring everyone in and not just do it yourself. You can sit down and do it yourself, and I think if you do it as yourself, it's more of a box ticking exercise, and you'll continue on your own sort of blinkered route. Whereas if you involve people or say, hey, look guys, this is what I've done, what do you think? And encourage them to tear it to pieces, encourage them to pick holes in it, because from my experience, that just sort of galvanizes the idea or the plan you've got. And if people can pick holes in it, right, well, there's a weakness, we can go back and address that and make sure that the plan, the project, the strategy is actually even more stronger than it was before. And equally, you can highlight areas that would actually cause a project to go totally off the rails at a point in time where there is a huge level of overcommitment, which results in a total waste of time, tying up the cash. Again, in our industry, whether it's livestock or crops, you have once you're committed to doing something, it takes at least a couple of seasons for it to be able to be reset or adjusted. So again, it's having that hour spent with people doing something like that. It's not the value you could put on that would be it'd be incredible, and people put a lot more energy into and time into things that don't achieve anywhere near as much as what that could help you achieve.
Yeah, that whole piece about being able to prioritize and using the team to help you do that is really key. Asking yourselves those little questions about whether you can control something and whether it needs to be looked at now or can be looked at in the future is really important. Now, I'm quite a visual person, and Tess has put up for you a slide that helps me do this. So when we're looking at this, this is a risk matrix, and essentially, very simply, it pits how likely something is to happen versus what level of impact it could have on you or your business or your team. So, Tess, I think there might be another version of this with my scrawling all over it again as well. Sorry, everybody, to read my writing, I know. But these are some of the examples that you've seen them on my SWOT analysis, and now I've transferred them over so I can get a handle on them as to what sort of pressure they put on me or put on the business. Now, John's alluded to this already. So each person or each team and each business will have their own interpretation of how big a risk something is to that person or that business personally, and therefore which box it should go in. John, looking at these, and I know they're sort of you have to take some of them with a pinch of salt because you don't know who JC is and RC. I'll give you a clue. RC is me. But for you, would some of this be in different boxes, do you think, for you and your business and your team, if you had somebody leaving?
Yeah, I mean, the business I run is family-owned business with 3 generations of the family, all as partners. There's aging in that, of course, but the impact on the business wouldn't be as significant because they're not managing as such. So again, it comes back to perspective and what means more to some people than others. But again, the more you can move it around and find common positions helps you manage that risk and also priority. And I think something I've used a sort of similar chart for helping prioritize time, asking yourself, is this something I want to do? Should I be doing it? Because 9 times out of 10, the things that you need to do are the very unsexy things. Actually, I'll go and wash the combine, or I'll go and inspect the ditches because I've got a BPS form to do, or an audit or something coming. And again, it's actually I could be out in the fields trying to save a tenner, but I could actually cost the business 130 grand or something. And that's in my position as manager, that's where you've got to go and have a word with yourself and have the discipline to say, no, I need to be doing this. And I often struggle, as the old adage as a farm manager, you just drive around with your arm out the window all the time. Well, yes, sometimes I do. And I find it very difficult at busy times of the year to leave the guys be. They're busy doing something, busy drilling, for example. I've got stuff to do in the office, and you think, off he goes to the office again. Yeah, sitting there drinking coffee. I can create a massive workload for myself because I'm trying to help the team out, be a team player. I don't want to see them suffer. And there I am with my workload, building and building and building. And then all of a sudden you've got a huge workload to do, you're tired, and you really struggle. I call it being stuck in the mud. Drive around, you have all these ideas and things. Yeah, I need to do that, sit down in the office, write it all out. I don't know where to start when you end up doing just little bits of them. And it's a total killer of time. Fortunately, I have a good team around me who actually say, right, no, John, you take yourself off, do what you need to do. We've got this. And that comes through being too touchy-feely and spending time with them and working out what they want, and also for them to understand what I have to do, what I want, and what makes me happy. But that's taken a long time, and we've been through a number of employees to get to that point where we've got nearly the dream team.
They've got to know you, understand what you need to do, your drivers, what you need to be able to achieve your job, to be able to then make their jobs easier or better or more smooth in effect. I mean, I've done that risk matrix. That's my interpretation of our business risks. So I've plotted that on there, and I've put on there, there's one on there for me about me not being able to get cover for the element of the job of the work that I do. For me, that would be a really big problem, actually, and no, it wouldn't be such a financial burden on the business, but it will be a big problem if I can't get the cover for a holiday or some time off, and then I'm stressed and burnt out, and then the productivity becomes a problem, and then it becomes a real business problem further down the lane. While I've looked at that on my own, we need to do exactly what John said and look at things together. It's good to look at stuff together because actually it utilises the risk happiness, I suppose, or risk adverseness across a team as well. So we have a member of our team that suffers anxiety and is really risk adverse, always thinking that the worst possible outcome is going to come, and where the rest of us are a little more sort of laissez-faire about it. Looking at something like the risk registers or the risk matrices together ensures that we consider all the different possible options and possible outcomes and what might happen within the business. Makes use of that team member because they're more prone to worrying about things and getting stressed by those elements. So it really makes sure they have that opportunity to voice their concerns and to talk over what's worrying them. And that's really, really important for their personal resilience, but also for the business as a whole.
And before we move on, Rach, how often would you do this? And how often would you go back and review it?
Well, doing this webinar has been a very nice reminder to get myself and do it. So I think probably the last time I put a business plan together would have been 2 years ago. So we would have an annual meeting as a family. Obviously, as a family business, we're meeting all the time, every day around the kitchen table. But to have proper constructive conversations about this sort of thing, we have a bona fide annual meeting, which probably isn't often enough in reality, where we'd review enterprise breakdown and then go back over our personal drivers and how happy we are to make sure we're still looking to achieve the same things, then ensure the business is going to be looking to achieve the same things over the next 12 months, but then how making sure that falls into our 5-year picture. And at that point in time, we'd be looking at the risks and doing a bit of a SWOT analysis as well. So yeah, so 2 years ago since I wrote it all down, probably due another meeting now. It should, I say due, probably was due in June. So, but that's exactly what John was saying about sometimes there are nicer, more sexy things to be going and doing. And the weather was quite nice and or quite dicey. So Harvest had to come first to it. But that going back to these documents, they should all be live documents or whatever template you use or however you want to write it down or consider things. They should be live. Don't do it once, put it on the shelf, leave it and feel that warm glow of having done something. You need to keep going back to stuff to review to make sure it's still relevant to you, your business and what you want to achieve. So when you've identified all those risks and you've put them into those boxes, if you want to use like coloured boxes like I do, and you've started to get that priority of what you're going to work on, then you can look at how you can either lessen the impact to the business or lessen the likelihood of something happening. So AHDB did some work on this and looked at what you can do, how can you manage any and basically all risks. And in practice, there are essentially 7 areas where you can look at for your business, look at for the risks that are facing you and your business. And you can, if you do one or more of these things, you can essentially either lessen the likelihood or lessen the impact. So when we're looking at business culture, we're looking at sort of that planning and monitoring, that whether you're going to invest, expand, looking at what external support, that labour, recruitment and management. So looking at that business culture, how you work your business, or how the business is worked. Cost management, I know it's a everlasting, enduring thing to do, but that like relentless cost management, it can get quite tiring and it can be quite hard work. But understanding cost of production, doing some benchmarking, looking at your contracts, looking at margin versus income, it's really important. And it does take time, but it's again down to that, where's John's time well spent? Is it washing the combine, or is it looking at contracts? Market engagement, how are you engaged with your market? Do you know what you're selling, the market you're selling it into? Are there options for diversification? Is your enterprise makeup correct for what you want to achieve and your objectives, but also for what you've got available to you? Collaborative approach, can we look at sharing equipment? Is the business part of buying groups? Are we using that sort of that team, that labour, that workforce picture? Are we able to join up with other people to take better advantage of skills that might be in different teams and different businesses? Commercial acumen, when we're looking at how we're having those routine meetings, are we having them on time? Thank you, Tess, to remind me. Are we doing that budget monitoring? Are we making sure that we're having those annual meetings, those 6 monthly meetings, the weekly catch-ups with everybody, to make sure those things are still happening in the business? Technical excellence, setting yourself KPIs for your performance, for looking at your health, the animal health, housing, yields, soil condition. Business objectives and structure, and that comes back to what we talked about at the beginning. Understanding vision, understanding objectives, making sure those are clear to you, to those you're working with. Looking at this whole picture that we've talked about today around risk management, having plans, making plans for succession in the roles, but also in the family, if it's a family business as well. I'll take a breath, sorry.
That's all good. While you take your breath, Rachel. John, when we're talking about risk mitigation, there's lots of business elements on that list, and I think that's what people normally think about. But obviously people is a massive risk, and it's probably at the fore right now with the shortage of labour. Yeah. What do you do to mitigate your sort of staff element?
Ensuring people are happy. I think it is what it boils back down to. And being or striving to be the best employer you can be. I mean, ultimately the business has got its what it's set out to do, where it wants to achieve, and ultimately if some people aren't going to be happy, then they're not going to work well in a relationship, working together and getting the business where it wants to be. But hopefully you've got a sound business, you know what you're doing, and you recruit your staff into that, and you ensure that they're as happy as they can be in the roles that they're doing in the business that they're working in. Because all this down the side is really important, crucial stuff. And I'm sure there's lots of businesses out there who have been, who will fall into a rut. And again, it's so easy just to brush it on the table and just keep going. That's what we've done before. We'll keep doing that. But actually sitting down, scratching our heads and having a chat around the table or in the office and addressing those 7 points there and asking the question, why are we doing that? Well, we're actually knowingly going out losing money. Why are we doing this? Well, we've always done that. Well, we need to have a revisit on that. And people they're human beings. They're incredibly fragile. They have emotions, they have feelings, they're subject to fatigue, tiredness, repetitiveness. So being in touch with your team and the members individually to make sure they're happy, and again, sitting down, understanding them, what's making them tip. Some people might not care too much about salary. It might be the tractor they're operating or the handling system of the stock that they're working with. They might have their ideas, and there's 1,000,001 ways to skin a cat in this industry. And actually, as I say to my guys, I don't really care how we get there, as long as we get there. This is what I want to have done. I want to have the drilling done by this date, or I want to have this amount of weed cut by this date at this moisture. Doesn't really matter if they cut the fields in the way I want it cut, or they drill it in the way I want it drilled. Let them get on with it. Let them have ownership of it and feel they're part of it. But equally, some people might really care about the money. And well, actually, especially in the last couple of years with ag inflation, people are struggling more than ever. Well, let's sit down and talk about salaries. Again, it's one of the areas of cost management in agriculture that is so easy to control. We'll just not pay this person anymore. This is the national living wage. We'll pay them that. Well, there's a good chance that someone down the road will be paying more because they're in a situation where they're struggling with staff, and actually they dangle a bit more of a carrot, then they're going to attract the staff. And there's so many things you can do. It's not just salary. Involvement in the team, you know, Christmas meals, harvest bonuses, long service awards if people have been there 10 years or 15 years. Well, get them a cottage in the Cotswolds for the weekend or something. It's really not going to cost the business a huge amount in the bigger picture for what that's going to bring to the team. And when you have your team firing on all cylinders, wanting to do the best job they can for you and themselves, again, there's nothing that's really not achievable. You can conquer the world when you've got everyone on side.
John, you've mentioned previously about the SWOT analysis and people having different perceptions, and I think with staff, that's one area where it would actually happen, where some people would see staff leaving as a risk to the business, and I think that's what Rach had on there. And other people might actually see that as an opportunity. How do you feel about that?
For me, that fits in both boxes. You know, when we have someone leave, if they've been offered a different job, or they're just going back to a family farm, or they've done a sort of contracted time we've had with them, it's a shame for people to move on. But equally, it brings in an opportunity to go, right, well, we can shake things up a bit here and have a shift round. Is so and so fed up of doing that? Do they want to do less? We can actually bring in a bespoke skill set to fill a gap, and that relates back to people being happy. You know, our combine driver, for example, he's peaked, or he's past 30 now. He's realizing there's more to life than sitting on a combine. He wants to do less, so we're looking at bringing in some extra help to cover the combining workload, so that it's not all on him. He can have a life, because ultimately this industry will suck the life out of you. There will always be a reason to stay at work. You never get to 5 o'clock and go, do you know what, there's nothing to do, let's just go home. It never happens. So yeah, it's sometimes it's quite exciting. You can say, right, we'll bring a new member of staff in, but what I think the whole industry is finding at the moment is the people aren't out there like they used to be. When I used to advertise for harvest casuals, you'd just be bombarded with applicants, whereas now you're sort of sitting waiting for them to come into the inbox, and you're almost wondering if you got the email address wrong, because there's just nothing coming through the door. And the industry is finding that the skills aren't there either, and people are demanding more. They don't want to do the hours. So that's for me where it's a threat and a weakness, because I'm skeptical about being able to fill gaps. But equally, in a sad way, it's exciting when you start to put an advert out, because you think, actually we can change this and mix it up a little bit.
And making yourself be that place people want to go to. They want to go and be part of your team because you are exciting to be part of, and you are a progressive business, and you are wanting to look after your team is a massive part of that as we go forward, looking at that as an opportunity rather than just as a threat or a weakness to a business.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, I know I've mentioned this once or twice throughout today's webinar, but I cannot say enough, find a way to write this stuff down. So I've also mentioned Tia put together a number of templates that I've mentioned today. They're all going to be on the Tia website, on a web page together, along with a recap on how to go about using them. Another template that's going to be on there around recording the challenges and the risks that are being faced is to put it into a risk register. So this wraps up everything we've talked about beyond the happy pages, if you like, or the happy questions. So it's looking at what is the risk, how big a risk factor is it to you, your team, your business. So you can do all of this as an individual, not just for a business. What is the mitigation you're going to put in? How are you going to reduce the impact of that risk? What priority is it? Now that's, again, it's going to be, like John and I have said, it's going to be different for different people as to what priority you put onto it, but don't just leave the stuff that is difficult to do if it's an important thing to do. And then importantly on there's going to be, what is the action that somebody needs to do and who is the responsible person? So something that's clear and concise, you're able to track what's going on, something that's written down, it's a reference document, it's not going to get hopefully too lost in the melee that is some people's offices. But like Tess alluded to earlier, this should be a live document. It shouldn't just be done and put on the shelf and left. And most importantly for me is that you allocate somebody to be responsible for moving something forward. So any plans that are being put into place as to how to reduce the likelihood or the severity of something, have a name against it, having that person responsible, and then spreading that responsibility around the team where you can, and everybody knowing who that person is, means that the team are then actively engaged and everybody's engaged with making the business more resilient, and that contingency and continuity planning can start to form the next steps that come out of this. Tess, I think we can go to that next slide. Thank you. So today I've taken you through one approach, and John's highlighted where sort of they might do things differently or the same. But this is just like one way of looking at something, to look at how you can support yourself, the team and the business to be more resilient. This has worked for some of the farmers that I've worked with and I've had the privilege to be part of, and it's worked for our business at home. But there are lots of different ways of doing this. There's lots of different templates out there. And to be honest, as much as I will be an advocate of using a Tia template because I have to be, and they are really good, as long as you do something, that is the most important thing. So if you don't know where to start and you're not sure if you need to do something, you do. But if you don't know where to start, there will be a list of 10 questions around that risk awareness that Tia's put together. That will help you perhaps have a little focus as to where you're best to put your attentions first. Then have those conversations. Like John has emphasised as well, the conversations and doing that thinking are really important, allocating some time to it. Use some templates if that helps you, but importantly, write it down. That ability to react, that knowing what you can and can't do, what's going to work for you to still be able to achieve your personal and your business objectives, knowing who you can go to for support, who might have the skills to be able to help you. That will give you that ability to adapt with speed, to meet the challenges, because you know that they've highlighted what they might be, but also the ability to take the opportunity for the opportunities that are there to be able to take your businesses forward and yourselves. that adaptability with speed will give you that resilient staff, that resilient team that make up the business, and a resilient business. And that's sort of my final pitch.
John, would you like to add anything on to that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Rach has fairly well summed it up there. I think the only thing I would add is, going back a previous slide or two, is when you write something down, you make a plan. Don't just commit yourself to that. Things change every day, every week, every month. So there's a case of monitoring and being dynamic. And there's a million and one things you can relate to that change things. And sometimes you can review it and go, yeah, this is still working. Let's carry on. Whereas actually the weather's changed. This ration isn't working, that variety isn't working. Well, let's not just keep banging the drum. Let's do something about it. And I suppose the sweet spot is knowing what you can change and when you can change it. And it sounded like a stock record. It comes back to bringing people in. What do you think? You know, I'm very conscious that over my career, I'm spending less time at the coalface and more time in the office strategically, etc. And you can become slightly disjointed from what's going on actually at the coalface, and it's all too easy to start going, oh, that'll only take 10 minutes, or that's no problem, they can do that. Whereas actually bringing people involved, or bringing people in to be involved, really helps you stay as realistic as you can be, so that you can create realistic plans and also come up with realistic diversions and alternatives if you need to change it.
Fantastic. Now, Rachel and John have both been through lots of information there. So if anybody wants to watch this back, the recording is available. And as Rachel's mentioned, there is lots of downloadable tools and templates to help you get started on this journey as well. So please do log into that. The recording will be available in a few days' time. Now, we're just going to go to questions for the last 10 minutes. I'm going to introduce Linda, who's our membership manager. Linda,
Hello.
what questions have we had?
So we've had some questions through on the chat, and feel free to put more in if you want to, but we also asked for questions when people registered. So I've got a few different ones, but I'll just start with this first one, which is just how important is it to have been an employee to be a good employer, which I think is quite a good question.
That's a great question. For me, I would always be advising anybody that's thinking of coming home into, say, a family business, to go and work for somebody else. Not only does that give you just a different picture of how somebody else does something, but at that point you will be employed potentially by somebody else, and that just gives you a whole different insight to being not working with your family, but also being employed by a different organisation. I don't know what John thinks.
Absolutely. I think it's really important, and that certainly helped me with my career, coming not from a farming background, starting at the bottom. A lot of the things I'm able to offer in my position are born through having been there, done that, and been on the opposite end of it. But equally, I'd say it's not essential. It will just mean that the task becomes a bit harder, and I think you need to be a lot more responsive and aware of what people are telling you, and being very good at listening. But yeah, to summarize, really helpful and important, but it doesn't mean that you can't be an employer if you haven't been an employee.
Yeah, and I think you might be in a position actually where you haven't got that as an option now to go and work for somebody else, but you want to be a better employer, and there is a lot of support about that, but that self-awareness piece is really important, and that awareness and the willingness to go and learn. So, you know, whether it be webinars that you're catching up on, something like this, really good podcasts that you can pick up on, or going and taking part in some leadership development courses. They're all going to be different ways that you can look to hone your awareness in that area, but also develop your skill set.
Brilliant. We've had a comment through just around sort of remembering that obviously some businesses have very small teams. So I don't know if we want to just have a little talk about sort of team size and what that means in terms of some of the implications you've talked about today.
I would say size to an extent is irrelevant. I think the smaller teams are probably the more fragile, more vulnerable. There are fewer people, but they have potentially a bigger say. And if you have someone who's not happy, for example, that's a bigger proportion of the team, which will have a much bigger effect. But equally, a team of 50 people brings its own challenges to manage. So for me, team size doesn't matter. And in my role, I would be more cautious of a smaller team. Yeah, it's a lot more tricky to manage, but equally you get a small team working well, and again that they can potentially perform exceptionally well.
I think taking completely that and going on from it, there will be people involved in your business that aren't necessarily partners or part of your staff and workforce team. So if you're looking at advisors now, well, I don't want you to go and ask the advisor necessarily to complete a set of questions on what makes them happy. It is really important they have an understanding of what makes you and your team and what makes up your team happy, so that they can understand what the drivers you have, and then any support they're giving you, how they can tailor that to make sure they're achieving your objectives.
Yeah, perfect. Do we have time for one more test, we think? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So just coming back to the sort of SWOT and risk matrix, the question is essentially, how can I sell doing a SWOT and risk matrix to sort of my dad and uncle, because they're not used to doing anything like that? So how do I sell that concept in?
Yeah, really good question, and something that I came across quite a bit when I worked with AHGB and supporting businesses to do that. And that they got somebody in. So you brought in an external person to not referee, because that might be taking the term too far, but that sort of having a person that's not emotionally charged into the business can really help have conversations and be an awful lot more open than you potentially would if you just sit yourself around a table. If you know you're going to have something that might be confrontational to talk about, or difficult, actually, not confrontational, just difficult to talk about, another thing you can do is move the space that you're going to be having that conversation in. Don't have it in a dominant person's space. So if you have a mother matriarch that holds the kitchen table, don't have that meeting at the kitchen table. Have it in a more neutral space. In terms of building in that idea, if you can find for how you can feed that in to encourage other people to engage with it to start with, if you can find where businesses that they might admire, for instance, have used that. So use that case study almost.
Yep.
So demonstrate, well, so-and-so's done a risk register and it really worked for them. Or a piece in the Farmers Weekly that might lend itself, or surreptitiously drop in, leave a podcast on. I was at a conference once and a chap said that he had the iTunes control of his dad's phone, and he would load up different podcasts to just move his dad in that direction for what he wanted to achieve in the business. So you might have to be a bit crafty.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I'm now conscious of time, so I'm going to wrap up and say thank you very much to Rachel and John. It's been really informative, and hopefully the people watching have found it just as useful. This is the first in a series. We have another webinar in December looking at lean management, and it'd be great to see you back on that one. We'll also send you a little feedback form because we're still learning with all of this. It'd be great to hear your thoughts and any ideas for any future webinars as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will end now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.